On a freezing night in Detroit, a homeless black engineer was just trying to stay warm near a pharmacy's air vent. When he saw a masked man about to rob the store, he didn't hesitate. He rushed in to protect the people inside. But instead of being thanked, he was injured and mistaken for the attacker. It wasn't until the security camera revealed the truth that everything changed, and a new door opened in his life. Before we dive in this story, let us know, where are you watching from? We love to hear your thoughts. The night hung heavy over the east side of Detroit, the kind of bitter cold that turned breath into smoke and silence into something sharp. Along Gratiot Avenue, most of the city was asleep. The streets were empty, the storefronts dark, save for one, a 24-hour pharmacy on the corner, its flickering sign buzzing faintly in the wind. Outside, curled up against the brick wall beside the delivery entrance, lay a man wrapped in a worn olive blanket, his back pressed to the vent where warm air seeped out into the freezing night. His name was Malcolm Wade. He was 43, black, with a quiet strength in his shoulders and a stillness in his eyes. His skin had been darkened not just by race but by time and hard weather. A speckled beard lined his face, trimmed with gray, and a pair of fingerless gloves covered hands that once held blueprints and measured tolerances. Malcolm used to be a civil engineer. He had built bridges, literal ones, over water, over highways, between neighborhoods he would never afford to live in. Before the pandemic, he had a wife, a decent job at a firm in Southfield, and a small apartment they were proud of. Then came the layoffs, the hospital bills, the funeral. One by one, the supports of his life collapsed like a badly poured foundation. For the past 8 months, he had been invisible, sleeping behind this pharmacy, because the air vent gave just enough heat to keep him alive, and because through the security glass, he could still see light. He didn't beg, didn't speak unless spoken to. Every morning before the city stirred, he packed his things, wiped the sidewalk clean with a piece of rag cloth, and disappeared until nightfall. He called it clearing the blueprint, his private joke, the kind no one laughed at anymore. That night, the air was colder than usual. His shoulder ached from a fall on the ice the week before, and the wind made it worse. He was awake, sitting upright beneath his blanket, watching the pharmacy door like he always did, a habit, nothing more. Until he saw the man. At first, it didn't register. Just someone walking slowly down the sidewalk across the street, hood up, head down. But something in the man's movement made Malcolm's stomach tighten. Too slow, too cautious. He wore a dark hoodie, gloves, and a black ski mask, not a COVID mask, not a scarf, but the kind that made his whole face disappear. Malcolm's breath caught. He glanced at the pharmacy windows, 2 people inside. A young white woman in a powder blue coat, flipping boxes of medicine in aisle 3. Behind the counter, a young Asian man stocking shelves, half distracted by a podcast playing through his phone. Neither of them saw what Malcolm saw. The masked man paused near the door, looked left, then right, then reached into his pocket. Malcolm stood up slowly. His blanket fell around his ankles. Every instinct screamed to sit back down, to stay quiet, to mind his own damn business. People like him didn't get the benefit of the doubt. They got tased, they got shot. But something deeper pushed him forward, an old muscle memory from when he still believed he could fix things, even without a title, even without a death. He stepped off the sidewalk. "Hey!" His voice cracked from the cold. The masked man looked up, startled. Malcolm raised his hand slightly, not threatening. "Don't do it. This ain't the way." The man didn't answer, just pulled a knife from his jacket, 4 inches of steel glinting under the pharmacy's neon light. Malcolm barely had time to react. He lunged forward, not to fight, just to stop him from reaching the door. Their bodies collided hard. The knife slashed downward and caught Malcolm's left shoulder, ripping through his coat and into flesh. Pain exploded through him, white-hot and immediate. They crashed against the glass door with a loud bang that echoed through the quiet block. Inside the pharmacy, the clerk dropped a bottle. The woman turned toward the noise, startled. The door flew open from the impact, setting off a low chime. The masked man slipped away, bolting down the sidewalk. Malcolm stumbled forward and fell to his knees inside the store, clutching his bleeding shoulder. Blood spread across his coat, his vision blurred. The clerk stepped out from behind the counter. "Hey, what the hell? What are you—" He froze. The young woman screamed. The only thing they saw was a homeless black man, bleeding, crouched in the entryway. Malcolm gasped, holding out his good hand. He had a knife. "Call the cops," someone yelled. "Lock the door." Malcolm tried to explain, but the words didn't come. All he could do was look up. That's when he saw it. Just above the door, blinking red in the corner. The security camera, still rolling, still watching. The harsh white lights of the ambulance stung Malcolm's eyes. His shoulder throbbed in waves of burning heat, and the metallic scent of his own blood filled his nose. A paramedic hovered over him, tightening a bandage with clinical focus, but Malcolm barely heard her voice. He was cold, exhausted, and trying to piece together what had just happened, what he had stopped, what he had become in the eyes of the people around him. As they lifted him into the back of the vehicle, he caught a glimpse of the pharmacy entrance. Police officers were already taping off the scene. The young clerk stood with arms crossed, shivering, while the woman in the blue coat pointed toward the door, her voice rising with urgency. None of them looked at Malcolm. Not like a man, not like a neighbor. They looked at him like a problem, like the reason they had to stay late, write reports, and answer questions they didn't want to answer. At the hospital, he was treated but not left alone. A uniformed officer sat just outside his curtained-off section in the ER. Not watching him like a victim, watching him like a suspect. Malcolm noticed, but said nothing. The doctor, a woman in her 50s with weary eyes, stitched his shoulder quietly, then asked, "Do you know the man who attacked you?" Malcolm shook his head. "No, never saw him before tonight." She glanced at the officer outside, lowered her voice, and said, "They're holding off on pressing charges until they get the footage. You might want to rest. You've got a long night ahead." Malcolm closed his eyes, not because he was tired, but because he didn't want to see the way people looked at him. Like saving someone was suspicious, when you didn't have an address to write on a form. Back at the pharmacy, Officer Daniel Lattimore reviewed the footage from the store's security system alongside the store's regional manager and the location's night supervisor. Lattimore was in his early 40s, cautious by training, skeptical by nature. He'd seen plenty of street incidents in his time, and most didn't end with someone homeless trying to be a hero. But as he scrolled back through the footage, frame by frame, a new picture formed, one that didn't match the assumptions made at the scene. The video showed the masked man pausing at the door. It showed Malcolm standing, approaching, raising his hands. There was no weapon in Malcolm's hands, no aggression, just warning. And then, clear as day, the masked man pulled the knife. The confrontation was messy, fast, but unmistakable. Malcolm had jumped in, not out of rage, not for gain, but to stop something from happening. He had gotten hurt because he acted when no one else did. Lattimore called the station. "We need a composite sketch," he said. "Suspect still out there. The guy on the ground, the one bleeding? He's not our problem. He's the reason we're not writing up a homicide tonight." At sunrise, Richard Lynn arrived at the pharmacy. He wasn't just the regional manager, he was the CEO of the entire chain. Mid-50s, clean-cut, second-generation Taiwanese American. He had built the company from 3 stores in Ohio to over 200 across the Midwest. He took pride in efficiency, in systems that worked, but that morning something didn't sit right. When he saw the footage, he watched it twice. Then he asked for Malcolm's name. He didn't need to be told that no one had spoken to the man with gratitude. No one had even asked who he was beyond a police report. Lynn took a deep breath and said, "Get me his hospital room number. Now." At Mercy General, Malcolm was sitting up in bed, his shoulder in a sling, his eyes distant. He had refused painkillers, said they made him foggy. He preferred the ache. At least it reminded him he was still alive. When the nurse told him someone wanted to speak with him, someone from the company, he tensed. "Let me guess," he said quietly. "They want to make sure I don't sue." But when Lynn entered the room, Malcolm didn't see a lawyer or a security rep. He saw a man who didn't come to apologize, with a press statement in hand. "I watched the video," Lynn said, calm but direct. "You didn't have to get involved. But you did. You put yourself in harm's way to stop something bad from happening to people you didn't even know." Malcolm didn't respond right away. His voice, when it came, was dry and low. "Yeah, I did." He looked out the window. "Doesn't mean I belong in there with them." Lynn sat down, folding his hands. "Look, I don't know your whole story. I don't know what brought you here. But I know what I saw. I saw a man who noticed what others didn't, who acted when it was easier not to." He paused, then added, "That's something I want on my team." Malcolm turned, skeptical. "You offering me a broom?" "No," Lynn said without blinking. "I read the intake form. It says you were a civil engineer. Is that true?" Malcolm said slowly. "Worked for Belmore Infrastructure for 12 years. Oversaw projects for MDOT." Lynn nodded. "Then I'm offering you something better. We're expanding our logistics division, building new infrastructure for our supply lines. Warehouses, delivery routes, internal tracking. We need someone who understands systems, structure, scale. I'm offering you a place to start again." Malcolm blinked. Not out of disbelief, but caution. He'd heard empty offers before. Jobs that disappeared once they learned he had no address, no bank account. But something about the man in front of him felt different. Honest. Tired, maybe, but honest. "I'll think about it," Malcolm said. "Good," Lynn replied. "Take your time. But just so you know, this isn't charity, it's respect." As Lynn left the room, Malcolm let his body fall back against the stiff mattress. For the first time in months, he wasn't thinking about where to sleep tomorrow. He was thinking about blueprints, about steel beams, about the sound of something being built. And maybe, just maybe, that something was him. The snow had melted into slush by the time the city woke up the next morning, but the story of what happened at the Golden Right Pharmacy had already begun to circulate. Not in headlines, no one had written anything yet, but in whispers, in assumptions, in 1,000 incomplete retellings of a moment no one truly understood. At first it was just chatter among store employees, then calls between district managers, then cautious messages passed between police precincts. A homeless man attacked someone. A scuffle broke out. Someone got hurt. The narrative shaped itself without needing facts, because facts took time and judgment didn't. But then the footage spread. It started internally. Officer Lattimore had made sure the full surveillance video was archived and flagged, and once the CEO himself got involved, it reached higher. Richard Lynn had no interest in PR spin. He didn't hire a marketing team or stage a press release. He simply sent the video to the people who needed to see it, the company board, his executive leadership, the local police department, and eventually the assistant district attorney overseeing the case. The video was clear, time-stamped, unedited. It showed Malcolm rising from his place against the wall, confronting the masked man and taking the blow without hesitation. There was no weapon in Malcolm's hands. There was no aggression in his posture. What the video revealed wasn't just a correction of an earlier mistake. It was a dismantling of the entire assumption that had clouded every interaction that followed. That afternoon, Detective Joanna Fields arrived at the hospital to take Malcolm's official statement. She was in her early 40s, straight-talking, and didn't waste time with pleasantries. When she walked into the room, she held a notepad in one hand and a portable recorder in the other. "Mr. Wade, I've reviewed the footage. I'd like to hear your version now." Malcolm didn't bother sitting up straighter. He was tired, sore, and skeptical of every badge in the building. "What difference does it make?" he said. "Looks like you already know what happened." Fields clicked on the recorder anyway. "For the record," she said, "tell me what you saw. What made you act?" He sighed, then started to speak, slowly, not dramatically, just plainly, like he was laying bricks in the truth, one by one. He told her about the man in the mask, the hesitation, the knife, about the way fear hit his stomach, but something older, something deeper, told him to get up. He didn't use words like heroism or bravery. He didn't say he meant to save anyone. He said he just did what felt right. Fields stopped the recording when he finished. She looked at him for a moment, then said, "You know, a lot of people would have stayed down. Just watched it happen." Malcolm shrugged. "I've been down long enough." The suspect, identified within hours thanks to a composite sketch and partial plate capture, was arrested that evening. A 23-year-old man with 2 prior assault charges and a history of drug offenses. He didn't resist. He barely even protested. When they asked why he targeted the pharmacy, he said, "They looked easy." The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Back at company headquarters, Richard Lynn called an emergency executive meeting. He played the video again for those who hadn't seen it, then asked a single question. What do we owe this man? Some board members mentioned publicity. Others suggested donation, a formal commendation, or press coverage. Lynn shook his head. What we owe him, he said firmly, is not a pat on the back. It's a future. That same evening, Lynn returned to the hospital. This time he didn't come with a folder or talking points. He came with a contract. It wasn't flashy, a probationary role in the logistics engineering division, starting salary, housing assistance built in. No spotlight, no cameras, just a chance. He found Malcolm sitting at the edge of the hospital bed, arm in a sling, reading a maintenance manual someone had left on the table. Lynn placed the folder on the tray and said, "You still interested?" Malcolm didn't open it. Not right away. "Why me?" he asked. "Because we need more people who move when it's not convenient, who act when no one's looking, and because someone like you shouldn't be sleeping on the street while guys half as smart make 10 times as much drawing fake warehouse maps." Malcolm smirked slightly, the first real expression on his face all day. "That's the sales pitch?" "That's the truth," Lynn said. Malcolm looked down at the contract. He didn't ask about benefits. He didn't haggle over salary. What mattered was simple. It was real. It wasn't pity. It wasn't a press stunt. It was a bridge, one he hadn't dared to believe still existed. "I'll take it," he said. Lynn nodded, no used respect. The next morning, the video made its way to social media, not because Lynn shared it, but because an employee who had seen it couldn't believe the story hadn't been told. The post was simple, just the clip and a caption. This man stopped a robbery, got stabbed doing it, and people thought he was the criminal. The views started slowly, then snowballed. By nightfall, the video had over 2 million plays. News outlets picked it up. Headlines began to shift. Homeless man saves pharmacy from armed robbery. Hero or victim. Surveillance footage sparks public debate. From the street to the system, meet Malcolm Wade. But Malcolm didn't talk to any of them. He stayed quiet, because to him the camera hadn't spoken to make him famous. It had spoken so the world would finally see what he had done, with no one else there to speak for him. 2 weeks later, the snow had turned to rain, and Detroit's winter gave way to something softer but no less gray. Malcolm stood in front of a different building now, a squat red brick office on the edge of the city's warehouse district. The sign above the glass doors read, "Golden Right Logistics Division." It wasn't glamorous, but it was clean. Inside there were desks, monitors, blueprints, CAD terminals, and whiteboards covered in diagrams. This wasn't a storefront. This was back-end operations, infrastructure, structure and systems. Malcolm's old language. He hadn't spoken it in a while, but it was starting to come back. They gave him a badge, not temporary, his name, his photo, and the word Engineer I printed clearly. He held it for a long moment before clipping it to his new jacket. The first day was overwhelming. Meetings, introductions, passwords, safety briefings. The kind of office chatter he used to roll his eyes at now felt oddly comforting. People shook his hand, looked him in the eye. No one mentioned the video, not once. They had all seen it, he knew that, but no one brought it up. And that was the first time in months he felt like a man again. Not a headline. His workstation was modest. Dual monitors, an ergonomic chair, a clean desk with a welcome note taped to the keyboard. His supervisor, Marlene Holt, a tall woman with a sharp tone but kind eyes, walked him through their current project, reworking the internal transport flow in 3 fulfillment centers. Malcolm took notes, asked questions, and when he saw one of the proposed layouts, he leaned forward and said, "This turn radius is going to cause trouble with the newer dolly units." Marlene looked at him, surprised. "You sure?" He nodded. "Positive. The new units have a wider base. That corner's a bottleneck waiting to happen." She stared at the screen, then smiled. "Well, damn, that's a good catch." The next few days were steady. Malcolm was always the first in, last to leave. He didn't talk much, but when he did, it was measured and useful. He read late into the night, manuals, regulations, industry updates, trying to catch up with everything he had missed. It wasn't just about keeping the job, it was about proving to himself that the part of him he'd lost was still there. Then the emails started coming. Not from co-workers or clients. From journalists. Local outlets first, then national ones. Everyone wanted the same thing. His story, his thoughts, his face on camera. Some offered money. Some framed it as an inspiring segment America needs right now. A few called him the engineer who saved Christmas, even though the incident had happened in mid-January. They romanticized it, cleaned it up, flattened it into a narrative that made people feel good, but Malcolm didn't answer any of them. One morning, Richard Lynn called him into his office. "I told the press we wouldn't speak on your behalf," Lynn said, "but they keep coming. They want a quote, a photo, something." Malcolm sat still for a moment, then said, "You hired me because of what I did, right?" Lynn nodded. "I did. Then let me do my work," Malcolm said. "Not the interviews, not the cameras. The work." Lynn leaned back, folded his hands, and said, "Fair enough." That Friday, after a long day reviewing schematics, Malcolm passed by a group of employees chatting near the break room. One of them, Jared, a young tech guy who had barely spoken to him before, called out, "Hey, Wade, you really not doing any interviews?" Malcolm paused, shrugged. "Nothing to say that ain't already been seen." Jared smiled. "Just thought people ought to hear it from you." Malcolm gave a half nod, then said quietly, "I didn't do it to be heard. I did it because no one else moved." Later that evening, as Malcolm stepped out into the light drizzle, he saw a woman standing under the overhang of the building, holding an umbrella and watching him. She was in her 40s, maybe younger, wearing a plain coat and a press badge on a lanyard. "Mr. Wade," she asked gently, "I'm not here to pressure you. I just wanted to say thank you. My nephew works night shifts at that pharmacy. He was off that night, but you didn't have to do what you did." Malcolm looked at her, rain collecting on the brim of his hat. "I know," he said. "I didn't do it for thanks." She didn't press further. She just nodded. "You deserve a chance to move on." Then she turned and left. Malcolm stood there for a while, listening to the soft tap of rain against concrete. He thought about all the things he could have said, all the ways he could have made the story neater, more heroic, more media-ready, but none of it felt right. Because he wasn't trying to be a symbol, he was just trying to be a man again, and for the first time in a long time that felt like enough. 1 year later, the morning sun broke through the clouds over Detroit like it hadn't done in weeks. Inside the Golden Right Central Logistics Hub, workers were already moving, forklifts humming, supply reports printing, morning briefings underway. Malcolm Wade stood at the end of the main corridor, clipboard in hand, watching a shipment being loaded into one of the new long-haul trucks. His left shoulder still ached on cold mornings, but it didn't slow him down. He wore a navy utility jacket with a company logo stitched over his chest and his name embroidered beneath it, Wade, Engineering Supervisor. The word supervisor still felt strange, not because he doubted his ability, he never did, but because for the longest time he doubted whether he'd ever be allowed to lead again. He checked the list. Pallets matched. Dock assignment confirmed. Everything moved like clockwork because Malcolm had rebuilt the clock. Over the past year, he'd redesigned the internal warehouse routing system for Golden Right's 3 largest facilities, cut processing delays by nearly a third, trained new hires, advocated for safer conditions on the overnight shift. He didn't talk much in meetings, but when he did, people listened, not because he demanded it, because he earned it. That afternoon, a group of interns toured the facility. One of them, maybe 19, hung back as the others moved along. She turned to Malcolm, nervous but curious. "Excuse me, sir. Are you the guy from the video?" Malcolm glanced over. "Which video?" he asked calmly. "The one from the pharmacy. The hero video." He let the question hang for a moment, then replied, "Nah. Probably someone who just looks like me." She blinked, unsure whether he was joking. Malcolm gave a small, knowing smile and pointed her toward the group. "Don't miss the briefing." At 5 o'clock, the shift change echoed through the halls. Malcolm finished logging the day's data, wiped his screen, and grabbed his coat. On his way out, he passed the security desk where a younger employee sat scrolling through his phone. Outside, the wind had picked up again, but spring was coming. He crossed the parking lot toward the bus stop when he saw movement across the street. A boy, maybe 12, thin jacket, backpack slung low. He was sitting on the curb, shivering. Malcolm paused. "Walk over. You all right?" he asked. The boy looked up, startled. "I missed the bus. Where you headed? Dexter and Elm?" Malcolm thought for a second, then said, "That's out of the way, but I know the route. Bus should be here in 10. He reached into his coat pocket, pulled out a small cup with a lid. "Still warm? You drink coffee?" The boy hesitated, then shook his head. "It's okay. I can wait." Malcolm nodded, placed the cup beside him anyway, then sat down on the curb. They sat together in silence. A minute later, a woman walking by recognized Malcolm. She stopped mid-step, watching him with a confused expression. "Are you—" "You are him, from the story. You're the one who stopped that robbery, right?" Malcolm didn't look up. He kept his eyes on the street and said quietly, "People stop things every day. Just depends who's watching." She didn't say anything else. She just smiled faintly, then kept walking. As the bus pulled up, the boy stood, grabbing his bag. Malcolm handed him the coffee, and the boy mumbled, "Thanks, mister." Malcolm nodded once. "Stay warm." The bus pulled away, and Malcolm turned back toward the building. He looked at the windows lit from inside. Workers finishing shifts, deliveries being signed. Then he looked up at the sky. Clouds breaking just enough to let in a pale beam of light. He never gave an interview, never accepted awards. When asked by HR if he wanted to be recognized at the annual company dinner, he politely declined. No speeches, no spotlight. But in his desk drawer, under old site plans and revision drafts, he kept one small piece of paper, a quote, scribbled in his own handwriting the night he left the hospital. It read, "I just hope I did something good on a day that wasn't." And as he walked home, coat zipped to the top, head held steady, Malcolm Wade knew he had. Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.